Each and every Wednesday, we are here to discuss our rest of season top 150, how that plays into the season-long trade market, redraft trade calculator, buy lows, sell highs, rest of season best ball drafts, and everything else. Be sure to stay tuned to the end of this program. We'll cover your listener questions and submit our one move to make of the week. Yeah, I want to start with more sad news at the wide receiver position. I mean, I'm just absolutely sick to my stomach. The three best wide receiver picks this year were Rashee Rice, Malik Neighbors, and Nico Collins. All three appear to be in big trouble now. At least Malik Neighbors, hopefully will be back soon from his concussion, but Rashee Rice out for the season. And now Nico Collins, with his hamstring injury, went from, oh, it's no big deal, he's day to day. He's going to be week to week. Oh, actually, Adam, we're just going to totally fist you, and we're going to put him on IR. He's going to be out at least 4 games. I have some thoughts on the fallout here, Mark, but what do you think going forward on Texans stuff now that we know Nico is out at least 4 weeks with this hamstring pull?
I think it's at least decent that we know he's on IR and we don't have to play the waiting game to see if it's going to be a week-to-week thing. So that's at least some glimmer of hope for us doing the rankings and analysis moving forward. I think it pretty much locks in Stefon Diggs to be a wide receiver 2 every week with wide receiver 1 upside. Just this target tree is going to condense a lot onto Stefon Diggs and Tank Dell. I don't think Dalton Schultz will take that big of a leap. And then the wide receiver 3s here are guys like Xavier Hutchinson and Robert Woods, who at this point haven't proven to be great target earners at this point in their career. So I think for Stefon Diggs, it's a pretty big boost to his weekly floor and ceiling. Obviously, we expect Nico to be back after this 4 weeks of IR. So when you kind of look ahead towards the playoff schedule, Diggs will be back in that wide receiver 3 range most likely. But just, with Stefon Diggs and Tank Dell, I mean, I think we can expect close to 20 targets between the two of those players every week. So really buoys their floor and ceiling every week. With Tank Dell on the field, with Nico Collins off the field, the last 2 seasons, Tank Dell has a 27% target per route run, which is quite strong. And so far this year, his ADOT has been 3 yards lower than it was last year. And we've seen Nico be that field stretcher with CJ Stroud for this Texans offense this season. So I do think Tank Dell's targets are more likely to come further down the field now. We get, the nice volume bump for him as well as big play upside. So for Diggs and Dell, it's, certainly an upgrade for those two. I think it probably knocks CJ Stroud down a little bit to the lower end of QB1, just given how explosive Nico Collins has been, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL the last 2 seasons. So it hurts the Texans upside offensively a little bit, but for Diggs and Dell specifically, it certainly helps their outlook.
Yeah. So I'll say this. Tank Dell, the tape bros are telling me he's not the same player he was. Last year's Tank Dell is not this year's Tank Dell. Remember, he broke his leg last year blocking on a goal line play. That is the same kind of injury that kind of sapped Tony Pollard and other players. He also got shot this offseason, did Tank Dell. And so the tape bros now are like, man, is Tank Dell the same player that he once was? Because the opportunity's been there. He's been running a route just as much as all these other guys. He's just been wildly unproductive. I agree with Mark. In theory, this should be a pretty big boost, I think, for Tank Dell. Can he actually capitalize on it? I think is a question. My bet would be yes, but I don't feel nearly as strongly as I did maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago that it's Tank Dell's season. The other thing that I would say is it's not good for CJ Stroud, man. We're already up against it on CJ Stroud because he doesn't run. You need so much volume and so much efficiency. This team has been way too throw heavy, in my opinion. I mean, way too run heavy, in my opinion. Way too run heavy on first downs. And so when you combine that with losing one of the best receivers, if not the best receiver, at least top 5 in the entire NFL, Nico Collins, I have concerns about CJ Stroud as well. They're running Xavier Hutchinson out there now as the wide receiver 3. I may push back a little bit on the Dalton Schultz thing. I actually think that they need to get Dalton Schultz going, and they might actually intentionally do that here without Nico Collins too. So, it's bad, man, but I don't think we can underestimate how important Nico Collins is to this pass game. Daigle, I think that's an important spot here. We didn't get to talk about it on the waiver show. Do you change your mind now on any other Texans pieces such as Xavier Hutchinson or Dalton Schultz or anything like that? And what do you think about Tank Dell now that we know Nico Collins is out at least 4 games?
Can't possibly be a good thing whenever you, quote, need to get Dalton Schultz going. But to your point, It's only been 39 plays this year with Nico Collins off the field so far, and it's Schultz who leads the team with a 28% target per route run rate. I don't think it's a buy high or buy Stephon Diggs kind of situation that probably a lot of people do. I still question Diggs' ceiling overall. He scored 2 touchdowns in week 1, and it was still his best finish as the wide receiver 9 in that week. I just don't know if he's even capable of having top 5 wide receiver weeks anymore. So it's certainly detrimental to the offense. I'm still willing to take chances on Tank Dell because you can get him for scraps. Even with this news, I don't think his managers want him. So I'm at least willing to take that swing. And then if we get a wide receiver 4 or 5 floor, whatever, I'll take it because we know the outcome, his range of outcomes can still be wide receiver 1 or 2.
Yeah. My lean, just going back to Nico real quick, my lean, if I have Nico, is to try to keep him. You could be in a bad spot where you need, but my lean is to try to keep him. We don't know for sure that he'll be back after 4 weeks, but man, it would be a really bad hamstring pull for him to be out more than those 4 weeks. They also get a home game against the Ravens in the fantasy finals, which is a really good spot. I mean, everybody is throwing on the Ravens, and that's going to be a home game there for Houston inside on the turf. All right. I think it's a really interesting spot. I could talk about that all day, but we must move on, Jack, to the big news out of New England, where Drake Maye, as we speculated, will be the starter. People are oddly excited about this. Like, I see people talking about Jalen Polk. We have him up to 127 overall. We do not have Drake Maye here in the top 150. Jack, what do you think all out of Drake Maye starting for the Patriots is?
Yeah, I think it's a bump for Jalen Polk and the other weapons on this team just because Drake Maye is a black box. The word on Drake Maye coming out of North Carolina was that he was a little bit inconsistent, needed to sit, needed to develop a little bit. Obviously, the Patriots did not give him a whole lot of time to do that. But we've seen what this offense is for 5 weeks under Jacoby Brissett, and it's not very good. I mean, we're about to find out how much of that was Brissett versus the bad offensive line, the bad weapons, pretty much bad everything in New England. But we've seen rookie quarterbacks in recent years come in and play well immediately. I think Drake Maye is an underdog to be one of those quarterbacks who immediately elevates an entire offense. But we know Brissett's not going to do that. So I think you have to at least open yourself up to the possibility that Maye could do that. I do think that given this offensive environment, the offensive line is still awful. Jalen Polk as your wide receiver 1 is still not a situation you want to be in. If you're an NFL team, I still don't think this is going to be a good offense. But it can't possibly be a downgrade.
Well, exactly. And the only thing I would say is I'm not sure Jalen Polk's going to separate from the rest of these guys, right? Like, I like Jalen Polk, but is he really going to like clear these guys and start getting 20, 25%, 30% of the targets, which I think in this scheme, in this situation, he probably needs 25%, 23% of the targets for me to even consider it. The Drake Maye stuff, yeah, he's going to try to run, man. I mean, to me, that's the best reason to put him in as the starter. Your offensive line cannot protect anyone. You need someone mobile back there. He's going to try to get outside the pocket, and he's going to try to run. But yeah, I don't think really big changes on the Patriots side for me.
The only other one I'd be interested in for 14-team leagues is taking a chance on Kendrick Bourne because he was the wide receiver 27 in fantasy last year in his first 8 games. Brought back slowly since he just returned from injured reserve with only 11 routes this past game. So he's the only wild card outside of Polk that I want to try.
All right. Let's stay in the AFC East and go to another big change, which will be the New York Jets. So talked with Silva when this first happened yesterday a little bit. And since then, news has come out that basically it seems like the Jets actually wanted to fire Nathaniel Hackett. His side of the ball was the one that's doing a bad job. But, you know, Aaron Rodgers, that's his boy. You can't go fire Nathaniel Hackett. It sounds like what happened is he was like, no, you're not firing my boy Nathaniel Hackett. Let's just fire Robert Saleh. So whatever, man. It doesn't really matter at this point. My point is more that Aaron Rodgers has so much control that he's going to keep Nathaniel Hackett in this role, which means, can we expect changes? Now, Jeff Ulbrich went out in his press conference and said, I have a ton of respect for all the offensive coaches on this staff. I'm still going to go through everything that we're doing on the offensive side of the ball and see if we can clean anything up. That's what I would do. Also, it's just a really weird situation. Mark, what do you think about handling Brees, who people have had enough of right now, and then Garrett Wilson, who's coming off of a 22 target game?
I don't think much will change offensively here for the Jets. You know, we still have Nathaniel Hackett there as offensive coordinator. There have been rumblings that his role will be reduced. Maybe they change up play calling duties there in New York, but you know, Aaron Rodgers is calling the shots here offensively, if not for the entire organization. So I don't think a whole lot will change unless we get, you know, a Devontae Adams trade to the Jets, which I think is a reasonable, you know, reason to be worried about Garrett Wilson and his 22 target game. Like he's not, it doesn't have that upside if Devontae Adams were to come to the Jets. But kind of looking into the Breece Hall and Bijan Robinson situation again this week, I was pleasantly surprised to see Breece is still sixth among all running backs in expected fantasy points per Leone's model. He leads all running backs in targets this year. So I do think like the opportunities should still be there for Breece Hall in this offense. Obviously, we've seen Braylon Allen cut in a little bit. That Breece isn't the main workhorse there that we were expecting coming into the season. But overall, with this Jets offense, you know, I'm not expecting a whole lot to change.
Yeah, I mean, the reason that Breece looks so good in those expected point models is because of the pass catching. He gets targeted down the field, not just behind the line of scrimmage like most running backs. He gets so many targets and he gets them down the field. The one that I'd be more willing to sell on would be Garrett Wilson, just off of the where he's running routes, the Devontae Adams rumors, and he's also coming off of this outrageous 22 target game, which is obviously unsustainable. That's just not the way the Jets want to play. So I was going to sell anyone on the Jets. I think for me, it would be Garrett Wilson. We do have him at 28 overall in the top 150. Similarly, Daigle, a huge topic this week is going to be Bijan Robinson and what's going on with the Falcons running game. Bijan Robinson was my move to make last week. I could not believe that in overtime, all the chips are down and Tyler Algier is out there for a bunch of plays, not Bijan Robinson. That was like, man, what is going on here? Now, that said, he gets a home game against the I believe it's a road game against the Panthers this
Doesn't
week.
matter.
Doesn't matter. They've been getting absolutely shredded by everyone and anyone. So I'm tempted to say buy Bijan Robinson. Again, people are going to call me crazy. Daigle, what do you think about the situation with Bijan right now?
I think you were a week early. How about that? A little flop lag for Bijan Robinson. On one hand, the target share has been cut in half. 19.5% the first two games compared to his last three, 8.3%. But he did have multiple injuries. He was even on the injury report ahead of the short turnaround. Those two games squeezed together, including last week's matchup against the Bucs. And now he has 10 days rest ahead of the best matchup possible for any running back, considering the Panthers have allowed at least one running back and twice two running backs to score touchdowns in every single game this year. So regardless of what happens to the target share, and I think it ultimately comes around because he's still one of the very best receiving backs in the entire league. The fact is, like, unless the rug is pulled out completely here, he's going to get there against the Panthers this week. So with that extended rest, I think now is the time to buy low.
Yeah. It's a really interesting time for Bijan. I think if they want to go where they're going, they need to use Bijan more. But, you know, this is the second coaching staff that has used Tyler Algier more than we thought that they would. So I think that's notable. By the way, one of the biggest risers in our top 150 is the Moondog himself, Darnell Mooney. Dude's a baller, man. Love the Moondog. Okay. Let's keep it moving here, Jack, to the Kenneth Walker stuff. So there might be some people out there who are saying Kenneth Walker only had like 4 carries or something crazy like that last game. We still have him at 18th overall and actually moved him up. And I like that move on Kenneth Walker because what we saw was the Seahawks, even in a trailing situation, even in hurry up mode, they still used Kenneth Walker for a bunch of pass catching stuff, ended up catching 7 balls in that game. To me, that is very encouraging. Also, we get a ton of coach speak this week from Ryan Grubb. He's infringing on our very valuable personal copyrighted IP. He's saying he wants to establish the run. We didn't get enough out of Kenneth Walker. I believe the exact quote was, I think if we had gotten Ken 10 or 15 more touches, things look different. He also said, we're not running the ball as much, and so play action isn't as believable. That's actually not true in the data. But anyways, we're not running the ball as much, and so play action isn't as believable. Establishing the run, shout out to us, is critical to a lot of things. So good coach speak. Shout out to Coach Speak Index. Good coach speak on Kenneth Walker right now, and good pass game usage. So people might be confused why we moved him up, but I like this. We're into the top 20 overall on Ken Walker. Seems like you could be a buy. I doubt the market has Kenneth Walker 18 overall. Jack, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I for sure think he's a buy if anyone's willing to give him to you for a reasonable price. Might be a little tough since he, just 2 weeks ago had a 3-touchdown game against Detroit. But like you said, they were a negative game script on Sunday. He played 67% of snaps. He had a 20% target share on the season. He's up to a 13% target share. Zach Charbonnet is still playing on some pass downs, but not all pass downs. In the past, we have seen Charbonnet play literally every third down, every 2-minute drill snap. We're not seeing that this year. Seahawks coaches dating back to August of this year during training camp have been raving about Kenneth Walker. That Ryan Grubb quote is along the same line, saying that we needed to get Kenneth Walker 10 to 15 more touches. I mean, 10 to 15 more touches is a ton of touches that he apparently missed out on. But regardless, he seems like pretty much a workhorse, and there's so few of those. And now we know that he's going to get the ball even in negative game script. So I feel pretty confident saying Walker is matchup proof and plug and play RB1 every week.
Yeah. Big Thursday night game against the 49ers for the Seahawks this week. All right. Another injury fallout situation, Mark, comes from the Saints, who lost Derek Carr for an undisclosed amount of time. I feel like he's going to miss at least 2 weeks, right? I believe they have a Sunday and then a short week. So miss at least 2 weeks here. Their backup situation, I mean, it's so irresponsible. I guess there's just a dearth of quarterbacks on this planet who can play. But like going into the season with Skylar Thompson or Jake Hayner or Spencer Rattler or Zach Wilson as your backup is just like, strikes me as incompetent. I don't know. I mean, anyways, it's getting ugly fast for the Saints, who looked like one of the stories of the NFL through 2 weeks, and are now like in big, big trouble. I don't even know what you could do here, though, Mark. I mean, nobody wants Chris Olave right now, and nobody wants to give up Rashid Shaheed. What do you think about handling Saints stuff as Carr goes down?
The golden shimmer has come off the Saints here pretty quickly after those first couple weeks, as you mentioned, and we got it in a primetime spot against the Chiefs, seeing Derek Carr go down. I do think, though, this Saints offense, at least the players that we want in fantasy, can survive a little bit just based on how condensed they are. Alvin Kamara, Rashid Shaheed, and Chris Olave are getting, close to 75% of the offensive opportunities here for the Saints in the passing game. And so even if Spencer Rattler or Jake Hayner is their quarterback, I do think that offers them a weekly floor in fantasy that we can feel okay about, at least for these 2 weeks. You mentioned that the Saints have a pretty quick turnaround playing on Thursday Night Football in week 7. But the Saints do have a pretty favorable schedule after that. So, unless this goes like full Dolphins scenario where we can't play Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed weekly, I still think they're holds because, as you mentioned, I don't think people are really wanting to buy into this situation right now. So for me, I would lean hold on all three of these guys. I expect this offense, hopefully under Clint Kubiak, he has kind of some counters to the defensive adjustments the Saints have seen early on, but the Saints offense has also lost key members on their offensive line in Eric McCoy and Cesar Ruiz. So, maybe in the next couple of weeks, as we go through buys, it's going to be tough to feel great about starting Olave and Shaheed, but, I just think their value for the rest of the season is probably higher than what the market indicates. And at least at this point, we haven't seen Carr put on IR or anything. So hopefully he just misses a couple games and can come back here. But I'm confident enough in the, how condensed this offense is and how talented Kamara, Olave, and Shaheed are that their fantasy value can hold at least a little bit above probably where the market is going to value them.
Yeah. I mean, and by the way, we have Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave only 2 spots apart now in the rest of the season rankings. Rashid Shaheed continues to impress, not just on bombs, but in everywhere. The Kamara stuff, there's no way he can hold up, right? I mean, the entire team, our defense going to be pointed at Alvin Kamara at this point. I mean, and also, like, been hearing some good rumblings on Kendra Miller lately. If you can sell Alvin Kamara, that would be one that I would consider. We have him 21st overall. I feel like, I don't know, without Carr, you might not get what you think you should for Alvin Kamara, but I don't feel great about him right now. Then again, I didn't feel great about Alvin Kamara coming into the season, and he has proceeded to shove it down my throat for a month. So is what it is there. All right. Let's go to, let's just go to the Bears DeAndre Swift stuff, Daigle. So he has had 2 of the easiest matchups possible the last 2 weeks. has DeAndre Swift. Absolutely shredded the Panthers. And then I believe the game before that was the Rams. I mean, the thing about DeAndre Swift to me is that, yeah, the matchups have been awesome, but their intention has been to hand the ball to DeAndre Swift so much and not play Khalil Herbert at all. So even if the matchups get more difficult, which by the way, they don't really, the Bears have an incredible schedule over the next month still, the game plan still revolves so much around DeAndre Swift, even if I think that it probably shouldn't. So, Daigle, what do you think about handling DeAndre Swift right now? Is he a sell high?
I think you summed it up. It's not a black and white situation. There's a lot of gray area here, even in the immediate future, because although you struggle to run against the Jaguars, I do not expect Swift to have success in that department. Where you attack the Jaguars is by throwing to your running backs. Even Trey Sermon got there with 6 catches. So I actually expect Swift to have a great day through the air, maybe go over his receiving prop, have 5+ catches as well, but struggle on the ground. The thing is that the touch counts, the usage really didn't change at all. These last 2 games, as you said, immense success against the Rams and Cardinals, which every running back has immense success against. But from the first 3 weeks, he handled 67% of the team's running back touches up to just 73% the last 2 games. Negligent difference. Really, all they did was take away Khalil Herbert literally altogether and then sprinkle the rest of the touches, including a goal line roll, to Roschon Johnson and Swift. So I really think you just test the market and see what you can get back. Because if it is a haul, then I'm absolutely willing to part with him. But I'm also fine holding him as a top 24 option too.
Yeah. So Jaguars this week, then Commanders, then Cardinals. I feel like I would want to hold Swift through the Commanders and Cardinals matchups, at least if I was thinking about trading him. I mean, he's going to be productive in those matchups, assuming he can sustain health here. And then in the fantasy playoffs, home game against the Lions, home game against the Seahawks in weeks 16 and 17. Tough to run on the Lions, but certainly can run on the Seahawks. So pretty reasonable fantasy playoff matchups. Also there for DeAndre Swift. Jack, let's go to this Najee Harris stuff, man. I can't believe. I was like, man, I have a chance to win a tournament. You know what I should do? Swap onto this blob, this incompetent ceiling Najee Harris. I mean, my God, man, what am I doing? So tilting. Even with Jaylen Warren and Cordero Patterson out, it's like I'm still not excited about Najee Harris. He's like, I'm trying to think, like Deontay Johnson in Pittsburgh, so bad on a yard per target basis. Like, even though the volume is there, I'm still not excited about it. So now you can start. We have Najee Harris at 91 overall. You can start comparing him, even though he's like a quote unquote workhorse. You can start comparing him to some of these timeshare backs. Now, the only thing that I would say is that if they make a quarterback change to Russ Wilson, that will free up more running back carries, more running back touches than with Fields in there, obviously. But I mean, we have Najee right there around Tank Bigsby, Bucky Irving, Rashad White, etc. right here. Now, Jack, has Najee Harris turned into a roster clogger more than someone we want to have?
I think the range we have him in the rest of season rankings are fine. I mean, you can see we have Najee, Tank Bigsby, and Bucky Irving all within 10 trade calculator points of each other. I mean, part of the thing with Najee is he has 82 carries. He hasn't scored a touchdown yet, doesn't have a receiving touchdown. He's averaging 3.3 yards per carry. Granted, they have offensive line injuries, but he's never been behind a good offensive line. And Arthur Smith historically has engineered a pretty efficient run game. So I do think you can expect more fantasy points per touch moving forward if we see that yards per carry increase and we see him maybe accidentally fall into the end zone 1 or 2 times. I do like he's not an explosive player. We kind of know exactly what he is. I still think that he has a useful role in fantasy. Whether I take him over guys like Bigsby and Irving kind of comes down to what you need. If you need a guy who can score fantasy points now, you're probably leaning toward Najee. If you're shooting for season-long upside, Bigsby and Irving probably make more sense.
Yeah, I mean the market I think is overheated on Tank Bigsby if they're valuing him as like, you know, in the 50s or in the 60s. We have Tank Bigsby at 93 overall, which I think is right. In that, people are going nuts though. Like Travis Etienne's not going to play anymore. First of all, they were playing the Colts, where the Jaguars when Tank Bigsby goes off. Second of all, this is like not how it goes. Like Tank Bigsby's not just going to completely take over from Travis Etienne. So, and Travis Etienne's been dealing with a shoulder injury, which they noted. So, I think it'll be more of a timeshare there than maybe the market thinks. If the market thinks Bigsby's running away with this fully, I'd be willing to sell Bigsby. But yeah, that's a whole different market conversation. Mark, last one here is the Chiefs stuff. So, when Daigle and I talked on Tuesday, I hadn't had a ton of time to think about the Juju Smith-Schuster stuff as it related to waivers. They're also going into their bye, I believe, are the Chiefs here this week, which makes it more complicated for people on waivers. But forget about all that for a second, the waiver stuff. Just straight rest of season. We know that Rashee Rice is out for the year. Sounds like they're out in the Devontae Adams sweepstakes. I still think they could try to add a wide receiver. I would not rule out Kansas City adding a wide receiver, but still, they're going to need something from Juju Smith-Schuster here. Mark, what do you think about him? And then we should also talk about, we have it really wide between him and Worthy. A lot of people were asking me, who would you rather have, Juju or Xavier Worthy? People think that that's a close conversation.
Yeah, I came into this expecting to be like, I don't believe this Juju thing. I'd rather sell him high than pay a lot of fab for him or try and get him in the trade market. But I honestly came away thinking that Juju could have a pretty decent role the rest of the season here for the Chiefs. He obviously wasn't good in New England, but in his last season with the Chiefs, he got over 900 yards, close to 80 catches in that season. So I do think this past week is likely to be his highest output game. And so it always feels bad to kind of buy into a situation after someone's gone for 7 catches and 130 yards. But Andy Reid has seemed pretty adamant that they feel comfortable with what they have in the building at this point. I do think Xavier Worthy is more of a field stretcher and opens up more of the underneath stuff for Travis Kelce and Juju rather than, more of a target earner himself. So maybe our gap should be a little closer here. Again, these are half PPR ranks. So I do think I would have Worthy ahead in those. If this were a full PPR league, I think Juju is a legitimately solid wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 asset there because he's likely to catch 4 to 6 balls per game. I do think the Saints struggled to, defend this Chiefs short passing game and we'll likely see defenses, kind of clamp down a little more in the future as they get resituated to this Chiefs passing attack. But I came away pretty, a bit more optimistic on Juju rest of the season than I anticipated to. So, we have Travis Kelce up to tight end 1. I think that's pretty fair without Rashee Rice on the field the last 2 seasons. Kelce has a 34% target per route run, which is just absolutely elite, especially at tight end. So the Travis Kelce drafters suck out here a little bit. He looks like an amazing asset moving forward. But yeah, I think, ultimately on the Worthy Juju thing in half PPR, I still lean Worthy just for the rookie upside and big playability. But I do think Juju is a more reliable weekly asset than I initially anticipated.
This run out, man. We have Travis Kelce as the tight end 1. He was going to be like one of the worst picks of the entire season. And now he's the tight end 1 rest of way. And I agree. He's probably the tight end that I'd like to have the most. We have Bowers and McBride just behind him in the ranks. All right. We got to move on or else I'm going to puke. Let's go to some of these questions here. Daigle, Uncle H. Uncle, what's up? He says, what do you do with Puka Nacua? Can you talk about some potential trades you would do to offload / acquire him? So word on Cooper Kupp is a real chance to be back in week 7. Word on Puka Nacua has been harder to come by. Last I saw, like maybe week 9, but it didn't seem too firm on that. Daigle, any ideas on how you'd handle Puka right now? We do have him 68th in the rankings.
One of those players where the value is going to change dependent on your roster. Still don't mind grabbing for the fantasy playoffs, but it's as you said, we've literally received no word on when he's going to come back, whereas at least we've heard potentially week 7 right now for Cooper Kupp. So considering that Puka's injury was ominous before week 1. Greg Rosenthal was the first one to point out that this sounds pretty bad. Silva wanted to drop him in season-long leagues ahead of week 2. May even be right and get that run out since we're just not sure on when he'll come back. I don't mind trading for Puka Nacua, but like who we're trading for, I don't know. Fire something up in the calculator for everyone. Do you have that tab?
Yes. Yes, I can tech lord over to the calculator, but
Like right now, Puka, and I want people to be more creative, but probably mark around George Pickens, Romo Dunze, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I wouldn't mind selling off an asset like Pickens, who there's a lot of weird stuff going on there in Pittsburgh around his role. And if you're off to a decent start, I do think expecting Puka back in week 9 or 10 is pretty reasonable. So it's certainly, as you mentioned up top, Daigle, it really just comes down to your team. In terms of selling him, I think going into the bye and him injured is about as low as it's going to get still for Puka. So I'd be more on the buy if you were looking for like that stretch playoff run. But I don't know. What do you think about sells there too?
yeah, God. I will note that week 16, the fantasy semifinals at the Jets, right? One of the toughest matchups that a wide receiver can see. But in week 17, the fantasy Super Bowl, home against the Cardinals will be the Rams. So, interesting spot there.
Like Adam, would you trade hot tank Bigsby right now for Puka?
Oh, I'd rather have Puka if I have a team that I think can be in the playoffs. Yeah.
Then I think if you have a playoff team and you don't need that running back, that's probably an offer that you should make because Bigsby the stock is probably never going to get higher than right now.
Agreed. 24 the money, Jack says, with the state of the Carolina Panthers, what the outlook on Jonathan Brooks, and you feel Chuba Hubbard will still play a vital role in the offense later this season. So we've talked about this a couple times. I mean, Andy Dalton has improved the offense. It's still not good. You see Chuba going absolutely nuts. I don't see any scenario really where they just push Chuba Hubbard to the side because Jonathan Brooks is back. Jack, we have Chuba slightly ahead of Jonathan Brooks here, 106 compared to 114. Thoughts on this spot?
Yeah, I mean, I'm starting to get concerned about Jonathan Brooks. I mean, the talk early in the offseason was that he'd be ready for week 1. The talk later in the offseason was that he'd be ready for weeks 3 or 4. Then they put him on the PUP list to start the year, and here we are going into week 6, and he's still not ready. Chuba Hubbard has played well. He's averaging 5.8 yards per carry. The Panthers have expanded his workload relative to Miles Sanders. They're 1-4. They really have no reason to push Jonathan Brooks at this point. It's a pretty serious injury he's coming back from, and I agree with you that I don't really see a scenario in which Chuba Hubbard this year becomes completely irrelevant. Yeah, I mean, we still don't, like, they haven't even opened his practice window to be activated yet, so that would indicate that he might not be back for 3 or 4 more weeks. And that's just when he's active. And then it's a whole other question is in terms of when is he actually going to seize the RB1 role? And I'm starting to get a little concerned that the answer might not be until 2025.
Yeah. I mean, why? Why would you put Jonathan Brooks out there for 15, 20 touches? Doesn't make any sense.
I'm the one on the call every Tuesday night as we sort these things through that's fighting for Jonathan Brooks. So I'll speak up really quick because we knew it would be a slow burn. And I'm just saying that we cannot predict what the Panthers backfield will be in week 14 for the fantasy playoffs. That is my defense for Jonathan Brooks. So I understand that he's not going to be usable for a month and a half, and Chuba Hubbard is more like the poor man's Jordan Mason for that time. I'm okay with that too. And both spots have value because if you have a top-heavy roster, I still want to acquire Brooks for pennies just to perhaps even luck box into a role from week 14 on.
Oh, sure. I mean, Chuba's touching the ball a ton. He could get hurt,
Exactly.
He's getting a ton of touches, so there's certainly no doubt that Jonathan Brooks should be on a roster. MLB P-Mouse says, thoughts on Adunze and Worthy, hang on to them and hope for a late season rookie production increase. So we covered Xavier Worthy a little bit. The Roma Dunze stuff is interesting here as well. Mark, what do you think about these rookie wide receivers?
I love holding on to Rome at this point. We've seen the Bears offense only have 3 wide receivers run around the last 2 weeks. That's really going to help their production in terms of floor and ceiling. Every week we've hit on how favorable the Bears schedule is upcoming. So I think it's only a matter of time before Rome, assumes that wide receiver 2 role. We did flip him above Keenan Allen in the rest of the season ranking. So I'd rather have Rome Odunze than Keenan Allen on my team. I know it's easy to say that too after Keenan has flopped in his first couple weeks back from injury. But I definitely think the the ceiling is going to continue to rise on Rome. Hopefully this offense continues to gel a little bit more with rookie Caleb Williams at the helm. So, I'm still holding on to Rome and optimistic there. Again, with Worthy, I think it's probably a little more boomer bust each week, but if he continues to get integrated into this Chiefs offense with the lack of other strong options elsewhere, I think that's reasonable as well. So these guys are two I'm still holding. I would be more willing to test the market on Worthy if people want to buy high just on that Chiefs offense. And he did score a touchdown this last week, so the box score looks a little bit better for him. I'd be more willing to flip him, but Rome right now is definitely a hold and someone I'm expecting his production to increase as the season goes along.
Yeah, I mean, on Rome, Jaguars, Commanders, Cardinals, next 3 games. You're not going to find better spots to get going for Bears pass game. My concern is what Windsurfer said here. Windsurfer says, how about Keenan Allen? Feels like Bears are more committed to the run than the pass. They're like, we're going to get aggressive. You know what? You guys are right. We're going to get aggressive this week. 20 DeAndre Swift carries up the middle, right? Like that's what goes through Shane Fraudren's head. And that is my concern. But man, if they can get into some shootouts here, again, Jaguars, Commanders, Cardinals, I like Rome and I don't want to give up on Keenan either. Obviously, DJ Moore looks like the for sure one there. Julian says, how do we feel about Ladd McConkey rest of season? Is there a shot he becomes a top 24 wide receiver to close the year? So another rookie question here, Daigle. The problem with Ladd is the same problem we had before the season. They just don't want to throw the football. Now, I think Ladd's good. We may not see it this season, though. We have him as wide receiver 36 overall. Julian's asking, can he close the year as a wide receiver 24? Daigle, what do you think?
We just need, as you said, the Chargers to be in more competitive game scripts. And we did get that a couple of games before the bye. Those first 2 weeks, of course, all they did was run over their opponents. But it's McConkey, not Quentin Johnson, although Johnston is still popping up for touchdowns. It's McConkey who still leads the team in target per route run rate. So top 24, if we get some more shootouts, sure. I think it's going to be a case-by-case basis, though. But in games that we predict them where they have to throw, yes, McConkey can be a top 24 wide receiver. That's the player we want there among all of their wideouts.
Yeah, I it's hard for me to click McConkey given the way they're playing, but still a great dynasty asset, I think. And I like where we have him here, around the wide receiver 36. I think that makes sense. Last question here, Jack, from Bank Daddy 12. I don't know if that's a reference to that stupid bank examiner joke everybody keeps doing. But anyways, he says, just got offered MHJ and David Montgomery for CeeDee Lamb. He has Henry and Achane. Well, let me tech lord over to the trusty trade calculator here. Marvin Harrison Jr. and David Montgomery for CeeDee Lamb. Marvin Harrison Jr. for CeeDee Lamb. Who was the other one on this side?
David Montgomery for Harrison.
David Montgomery. So we have that as pretty fair. 3%, very, very, very slight edge over here to the CeeDee Lamb side. The Marvin Harrison stuff has been, I don't know. Like, I don't want to say scary because he looks really good, but also I'm like, man, how did he catch? Every time he catches the ball, I'm like, man, how did he catch that? Like, he has like 1 foot. He's like falling out of bounds. There's guys all over him. It just doesn't seem that sustainable to me, but that's just totally anecdotal. Anyways, Jack, what do you think about this trade, which the calculator has pretty fair?
Yeah, I think it's pretty fair. I kind of lean the Harrison Montgomery side, to be honest. Although if you have Henry and Achane with Tua ideally coming back pretty soon, you don't have a huge need for Montgomery. But I mean, both MHJ and Montgomery are very valuable assets. So I kind of lean that way. I still think there's some chance that Marvin Harrison just rapidly ascends. Like, this is still a rookie we're talking about with 5 career games. There's a chance he could just go insane over the second half of the year. But yeah, I mean, pretty close. I think kind of pick your poison here.
Yeah, one thing that I would say is Eagles and Bucks and Panthers. That's the Cowboys playoff schedule. So week 15 Panthers, week 16 Bucks, week 17 Eagles. That's really nice for CeeDee Lamb. I feel like if Jalen Tolbert can play, if Jake Ferguson keeps playing like this, they're going to get more single coverage on CD, and he's going to have some really big games. So my gut on this one is CD, just because I'm a little queasy on Marvin Harrison. If you feel really strongly about Marvin Harrison, this would be a smash for the Harrison and Montgomery side. So yeah, I can see both sides of that one. All right. It is time for the one move to make ahead of week 6. I'll switch the order here today. Jack, you can go first. One move to make for the people ahead of week 6.
Yeah, I'm going to say sell Christian Kirk. He's had a good past 3 games after a pretty brutal start to the season. But in week 5, he only played 53% of snaps. His route rate fell to 68%. They've got Evan Engram coming back. Kirk has actually been targeted a little bit further downfield this season. His average depth of target is 13.7, but historically we're used to seeing him get the more underneath targets, which Ingram's return could threaten. And to me, I mean, it's just so obvious that Brian Thomas is the alpha in this offense. He's just been unbelievable to start the season. I don't know what the LSU defense looked like last year, but I don't know how they didn't just win every game with Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, and Brian Thomas. But yeah, I mean, Thomas is rapidly ascending. Evan Ingram's back. We've seen him take a 20+% target share. I just don't really see the room for Christian Kirk to be that great of a fantasy asset, and he needs the ball. It's not like he's a guy who gets down the field, scores a bunch of touchdowns. He needs the volume to get there, and I worry about the volume with Ingram and Thomas taking so much of it.
100%. You know, that was my concern on Christian Kirk preseason. Like, am I really going to get burned by round 4 or round 5 Christian Kirk? It's really hard to do. Like Jack said, he needs a ton of volume for him to bury me there. So yeah, I like that as a sell if anyone is buying. Daigle, your move to make ahead of week 6.
I know some people are upset that they spent X amount of fab and started Dontavian Wicks in week 5. And if you are one of those people, I want to take this time to apologize to absolutely nobody. Because imagine being upset about having the wide receiver who led the Packers in targets in both of the last 2 games and leads the team in both red zone and end zone targets. We are buying Dontavian Wicks low now.
Love it. Love it. I think that the people, I think that the people who follow this stuff closely and understand know that Dontavian Wicks was an awesome play last week and will be an awesome play on Sunday against the Cardinals once again. I will say, though, dude's ball skills, man. He looks like my kid out there. I'm like, dude, the ball is right there. Just go get it and catch it. I'm like, there's something off. There's something off with his ball skills. That's all I'm going to say. I'm no tape bro, but there's something is off.
It's not apples to apples, but Jamar Chase had drop issues until he didn't. Deontay Johnson had drop issues until he didn't. You just bet on talent.
I don't care. It's not the drop issues. It's like the ball's like right here and he's like looking over here. I'm like, what are you doing, dude? But anyways, I agree. I'll be back in on Dontavian Wicks this week for sure. All right, Mark, go ahead.
I'm going to go with buy Chase Brown. So I think the market has been a little slow to react to some of these high ankle sprains for running backs. We saw week 1, or we saw Joe Mixon go down with a high ankle sprain. He came back in and played a snap and then has missed the next 3 games. Looks unlikely to play this week as well. We saw Jonathan Taylor go down a couple weeks ago, missed last week, did not practice again today. And in this past week, we saw Zach Moss go down late in the Ravens game, which looked like a clear high ankle sprain. He did come back in and get a carry. So I think people might be slow to react here. And I think it's the perfect time to buy Chase Brown. Even if people know that Zach Moss is injured, I think they're going to underrate just how great of a spot this is for him. I think if he, takes over this RB1 role, he could just play well enough to win it from Zach Moss the rest of the season. So I think this is a great time to buy Chase Brown. We know how explosive this Bengals offense is. They have some great matchups coming up against the Giants. The Browns aren't exactly the fearsome defense that we've come to know. And then they also get the Eagles, Raiders, Ravens again. So I think this is a great time to buy into the Chase Brown hype. I did say to buy Zach Moss a couple weeks ago, so I apologize to those people who followed that advice. But I do think now that the landscape has shifted, and just given his explosiveness and the likely touches coming his way, I think it's a great time to buy.
Well, he's played well, and I mean, they still don't trust him to be in there to protect, to be the blocker for Joe Burrow, but in all other situations, I feel like they want to get him the ball. So certainly for the best ball bags, Chase Brown would be a very, very good one. All right. For mine, I was going to say buy Tyreek Hill, but I keep being too early on this. I said buy Brandon Ayuk a couple weeks ago, and I was 1 week early on that. I said to buy Bijan Robinson last week. Hopefully that's going to be just 1 week too early there. I still think Bijan Robinson is an interesting buy if people are panicked. But for this week, I'm going to go with one that I think can be hopefully a more immediate hit. Buy all Eagles. First thing, coming out of the bye, expecting to get Lane Johnson back. The splits when Lane Johnson plays for the Eagles versus when he doesn't are just absolutely massive. I think that matters a ton. Second, this schedule they have coming up, this is the time for them to start going nuts. Browns, Giants, Bengals, Jaguars, Cowboys, Commanders, Rams, Ravens, Panthers. I mean, they have like 2 months of good matchups due the Eagles here. Love how aggressive we are on A.J. Brown. We have him 7th overall. Saquon, number 1 overall. Devonta Smith, 16 overall. Jalen Hurts, 24 overall. All those guys would be buys for me. I bet that our ranking is above market on pretty much all those guys except Saquon, who I assume most people have at number 1 overall. So, yes, it is Eagles. Oh, and the other point that I wanted to make on the Eagles that I almost forgot to, this defense, 30th in yards per play allowed. They're talking about making changes in the secondary ahead of their game this week. I mean, I don't think it's going to help. They're going to get into some wild shootouts. They, again, for the second straight year, cannot defend the pass. So, yeah, really like the Eagles setup going forward. All right. That is going to do it for this rest of season top 150 show. If you have trade questions, Daigle is at your service. If you're a DraftKit Pro subscriber, Daigle, when is the trades AMA?
Trade and buy low is Wednesday, 5 p.m. Eastern.
If you're in the if you have DraftKit Pro, you do have access to the subscriber only Discord. You can go find Daigle and ask him your very close personal questions there. If you'd like to play around yourself, you can go to the DraftKit tab and click on the rankings or the trade calculator. For everyone else, appreciate you. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube. We'll keep doing this show every week. For Daigle, for Mark, for Jack, for producer Luke, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.